Today, we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Incline Station Red is a red ink, although a kind of dusty red. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Fountain Pen Revolution Himalaya with their flex nib to take my notes for this video. Before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down, immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is this kind of really diluted red that's left behind. All the dark red immediately pushes up the chromatography paper, and it doesn't seem to travel very far. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and we see that there is a lot of hold on the bottom. A lot of that ink really set into place, which is good for protecting it, and I expect is going to be fine for cleaning from the pen. We do see that kind of orange, very light red push up and the darker red come in at the top. It very much looks the same there. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more important, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. Looking at the highlighter, it seems to perform perfectly fine under the highlighter. It reactivates, and the second H is the only part that reactivated. A little bit of it moved, but I don't think it's going to destroy the writing if you had to highlight this in your notes. Looking at the water, we see that while a bunch of it reactivates and pulls up off the page, a lot of it is left behind. So that dark line from the chromatography where I let it dry, it looks like this might have a bit of stick around or resistance, since it's a resistance test. Pen flush does very much the same thing that the water does. It makes me feel that the flush is not doing much more than water if I had to use that to clean out of my pens. So I'm really hoping that water is all that it would take, because flush doesn't look like it's doing much more. Now bleach completely obliterates this, pulls it entirely off, only leaves a tiny little bit of a dark spot. It's not a yellow staining, it's this darker kind of haze left on the paper. I'm just hoping that there's no need to get to the bleach stage to get this out of your pens. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red has a viscosity of 2.06, putting it just outside of normal as a wetter ink. To find my average dry times, I use the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Rhodia, and Tomoe River in my writing samples. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red has an average dry time of 13 seconds, which puts it just inside normal. So both the viscosity and the dry time are in that same region. One is right on normal, one is just outside of normal. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in bottle form back when I ordered about 30 or so bottles from Krishna Inks, and there was a lot in there that were great surprises. I would have had no idea about this, even what to think, based on its name. Very nice ink. So to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at some Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, but look at the shading that's going on with this ink. This light is way too high. I am sorry. There we go. Look at the shading that is going on with this ink. It's great. This is one of, if not the best shading ink I have ever seen. Shading greens I've ever seen. It's wonderful. Great. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and yes, shading please, all over it. Only 6 seconds to dry. Now, the medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and beautiful, beautiful shading. Look at the word jumps. That part of the U gets to this really nice, like lemongrass green, and then it gets to a very, very dark green like you see on golf courses, that tiny little, the green's green. It's great. Just wow. 11 seconds to dry. The extra fine and the medium both show us we're going to get a ton of variation, and we do. The smear test, I'm not sure if you would be able to recover this. Looking at rhodia paper, we get no bleeding. Yes, we do get ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread. It does have some haloing, no sheen, and it gets shading all over it. Great shading all over it. Just wow. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and we lost the shading here with the extra fine. 11 seconds to dry. The medium, look at that darker tone that's the base. Just nice. Just wow. It has no feather, no spread, no consistent haloing. It does get haloing where it was darker. It doesn't get it where it was lighter. So we get some haloing, but like on Quick, the bottom of the Q where it's dark, we have some halo. But on the U where it's light, we don't have any halo. So, you get some, but not all, on that haloing. We have no sheen. We do get shade, plenty of shade, with the medium. It's just really nice. 18 seconds to dry. Now, when we look at the scrubbies, both of them show us not a lot of color variation, which was true for the extra fine, not so true for the medium. The smear test says you don't get to recover this because you wrote on Tomoe River paper. So, rhodia paper. Now, that's not a bleed spot because it doesn't line up with anything underneath. That's me being sloppy. Unfortunately, all too common an occurrence. It has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does show some shading, nowhere near the amount of shading that we saw in the Clairefontaine. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and yes, shading all over the place. This has been a consistent shader. I'm glad I have a bottle. I wish it was a bigger bottle. 7 seconds to dry. The medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, shading. Now the shading is not as big here. We see it more in Lazy. We see it some in Fox. We do not see it in Brown or in The. We barely see any in Quick. It's the paper. It's the coating. It's got it sitting on top longer, and it's sort of messing with its ability to shade, but we still get some lovely shading on the rhodia at only 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine and the fine show us some color variation. The extra fine and the medium. The medium shows us a little less color variation, but we got less color variation in the writing itself. Now the extra fine shows a ton of color variation, and we got it. We got it there. So nice. The smear test. The smear shows we're not going to recover this. We're not going to recover this if we smear. I'm trying to remember now if I'm talking about the shading of the extra fine, where it does show some really nice shading in areas. Very nice light color. Very, very nice. Just nice. So I decided to test this particular ink out on a different tone paper. I put it onto a yellow tone to see what happens with that green. The yellow rhodia gives us no bleed. That's me being sloppy. Sorry. Gives us no ghosting. And look at that. Even with the change in tone for being on a yellow background, it gets a little bit lighter. It's still a lovely, lovely green. If you like green ink, get a couple of bottles of this. Krishna needs to make some larger bottles, just because it takes us so long to get them here in America. It takes a long time because other than India, it's a ship international, so it's going to take some time. Now, the thing that did happen with the yellow paper, the 1.1 had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, almost no shading in it. So we lost a bunch of that shading for toning everything down. Beautiful color, loss of shading. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, loss of shading. We lost the shading here again. Again, it's just it being lighter. The 7 seconds to dry. The medium, A much darker tone. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, shading all over the place, and it's fantastic. At only 13 seconds to dry. Now, when we look at the Scrubbies lied. The medium said we're not going to get any shading, and we did. And the extra fine said we're going to get shading, and we didn't. The smear test, you're likely not recovering if you smear this. So I tested on this hazel paper, the hazel paper I ordered when I ordered all those inks. Once again, here's that notebook. I would recommend anybody to order a bunch of inks from them directly. Take the time and get a couple of these notebooks, because the paper, it's very toothy, but on a walk-around notebook, on the pocket-sized notebook, it is great. I don't know that I want this as a big notebook. I just don't feel the paper's for me, but I would not turn down a big notebook because the paper performs so well. No bleeding, no ghosting. No ghosting in a pocket-sized notebook. Moleskine, learn a lesson. Moleskine, order some of their notebooks. Figure out what paper they're using. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shading. No shade here. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Light shading, like over looks a little bit darker. The right side of Quick looks a little bit darker. The left side of Brown a little bit darker. So we are seeing a little bit of shading here, just not a ton. Only 3 seconds to dry. Now the medium, ignoring where I put my thumb when I write, and that's what tends to happen right there all the time. I don't know why. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and again, almost no shading. We really have to look to things like brown over to dog. We see a shade difference. If we look at the to fox, we see a shade difference. We don't see a lot in fox to dog. They look very close in tone, but brown and lazy certainly are different tones. So we get shading. It just occurs much more word to word than within the word. 4 seconds to dry. Now, when I look at the Scrubby, the extra fine shows us we're going to get shading. We do. The K is a little darker, sure. Over is a little darker, part of brown. We do get shading. It doesn't exactly match in the shading. It doesn't show nearly as much in the extra fine as we did get in the writing. We did get some in the writing within the words. It just doesn't show as well here in the Scrubby. The medium shows almost no shading, but we did see some shading in the writing. The smear test says on both you don't get to recover this if you smear it. So I tested this on Levenger paper. We had no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. When we go to the extra fine, it's the same tone. We have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We are seeing some of that light shading in there. The shows some shading. Quick shows some shading. Lazy shows a little bit of shading. The 5 seconds shows a little bit of shading. Just not a ton on this paper. We go to the medium. We get no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We are seeing some shading. Once again, ignore where I place my thumb. But we do see dog is a different tone than jumps. A different tone than 7 seconds. A different tone again than brown. So we do see shading. It's word to word, not within the word. 7 seconds to dry. The Scrubby of the extra fine shows no shading. We really didn't see any shading. The Scrubby of the medium shows no shading. We did see some shading word to word. So I don't know, if I did another one, I might see a slightly different shade. Now the smear test says we're not going to get to recover this if we do smear it. And that's all that I have for the writing.
Instead of finding inks that look like Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I went with a blue because I think blues and reds go nice together, and I chose Diamine Eau De Nil because it's a very nice blue ink. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red? I think it looks like red paint on metal that's been sun faded. It is a very distinct red color. It's quite nice. It gives a lot of very nice shading, but I would avoid it in super wet or flexi pens because you kind of lose some of the great effect that this ink can have.
Thanks for watching.